When I got married, times were tough. I struggled to afford a wedding ring for my wife. The truth is, I was not able to afford the ring. This is not because it was a platinum ring, but rather, at the time, I had just finished college. It was during the 2009 recession. I had little income and massive student loan debt. At the time, even though it was the best deal I could find, the ring I got from BlueNile.com was almost $400. It may seem that $400 is not that much for a wedding expense, but if I told you that $400 could not just buy a wedding, but also buy a wife, that might sound a little bit shocking. Please like, share, and subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay up to date. How can one pay money for a wife? The short answer in modern times is that, at least to my knowledge, not in the developed world, you can't. But if we look at historical and cultural context, then that changes. According to the Bible, Deuteronomy 22:28-29, if a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give to the father of the young woman 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife because he has violated her. He may not divorce her all of his days. I will make no opinion about whether this is moral or ethical because although I do live by modern standards, I also understand that some scholars may disagree with me about what this might mean. My understanding, and this could be wrong, is that this passage means that if a woman who is not married sleeps with a man, either willingly or coerced physically into doing so, the man who does it must pay her father 50 shekels of silver and then she becomes his wife. It is my opinion that this was a common enough practice at the time that it actually made its way into the Bible. This practice of paying for a bride, also known as bride price, was quite common in the ancient world and still exists today in some cultures. A bride price, unlike a dowry, is money, property, or other form of wealth paid to the groom and or his family to the bride-to-be and or her family. This can be seen further among the ancient Hebrews as evidenced in Genesis 29:15-30, where Jacob worked for 7 years to be able to marry each of the daughters of Laban. Another good example to demonstrate how common this is throughout the world, even today, is the Chinese practice of bride price. Anecdotally, I have heard from some young people living in China that a groom's entire family will borrow money and pool all of their savings to help him buy an apartment and a car to get a wife. I thought you said you can get a wife for $400. Well, let's use the example of Deuteronomy and do some calculations. A shekel by weight is 11.42 grams. The price of silver per gram as of February 17th, 2021 is 88 cents per gram. Therefore, if we multiply 50 shekel times 11.42 grams of silver per shekel times 88 cents per gram, then we get 571 grams of silver times 88 cents per gram, and that comes out to $502.48 for a wife. You may be thinking, so what, right? That's just a meaningless number, and you can't put a price on a wife, and you also can't use this ridiculous figure, which comes out to less than a week's worth of minimum wage in California to draw any meaningful insight. Yes, there is some truth to that, but let's put that into context. Ancient bride price in context. Originally, and according to my history professor at university, the ancient Hebrews were a nomadic people, and one of their big economic engines was to herd animals. They did this because they did not own land, so this was the most viable option for agriculture. That is important to keep in mind because many rituals we know did come from this tradition. Later on, the ancient Hebrews did cultivate crops as well, and like pretty much every other ancient culture, including India and China, their economies were agriculturally based. And they didn't have industrial production capabilities, so everything was made by hand and was made pretty much as a one-off kind of thing that you make. And there wasn't much stuff that you could actually buy or trade. We can look at what can actually be bought nowadays in context using GDP per capita PPP, which is Gross Domestic Product per capita purchasing power parity. That is essentially the total economic output of a country divided by its population, then weighted based on their currency to get a rough idea of what the average citizen of the country and what they can buy. It is commonly not far off from a country's median salary or maybe even their average salary. We can look at which countries have the greatest percentage of their population working in agriculture. Let's use Congo as an example because over 80% of their population works in agriculture. A lot of people there do subsistence hunting and farming to survive, and most of the country does not have modern roads, power grid, or other infrastructure the way that a developed country does. The idea here is that this environment would be more similar to that of the ancient Hebrews than in a more modern and more developed country. They rank pretty low in GDP, PPP, compared to the rest of the world. Based on what we see in these estimates, let's just use $4,000 as an example of purchasing power per person. That would mean that if we compare the economy of the ancient Hebrews to one that is sort of like it today, we can see that 50 shekel of silver, or $500, is about 1/8 of an average earner's income. We can compare that to the United States to get an idea of what that would mean. For simplicity, let's say that the GDP per capita, PPP, in the United States is $60,000 a year. If we divided that by 8, we would get $7,500. And I don't think that any woman in America or any family of a woman in America in the 21st century would be willing to accept $7,500 for marriage, but it could have covered the cost of a small wedding prior to 2020. The point is, it might seem ridiculous to us nowadays to think that 18.3 ounces of silver could buy a wife, but in context, it makes a little more sense when we look at the value and purchasing power that it can have in a society. History records how much stuff costs, but if we look at it from the right perspective, we can put it into terms that we can relate to and understand to know what used to happen and know what societies really used to be like. I think that this is an important tool for learning, and it can teach us a lot about how valuable some things really are. I hope this was informative. Please be sure to check back in the future for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.